Imagine an affluent neighborhood in Noida, India. You've got manicured lawns, sprawling bungalows, the quiet hum of luxury
Right,
cars.
a real bubble of wealth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now imagine the working class village, literally right across the street. And suddenly, the children from that village just start vanishing into thin air,
Just gone.
one by one. And for 2 years, the police they look the other way. When the truth finally surfaces in a neighborhood drain, it completely shocks the world. But 17 years later, the justice system delivers an even bigger shock. The men who were sentenced to death for these horrific crimes are allowed to walk free.
It's a staggering reality to confront for anyone. You look at a case with such visceral, undeniable physical evidence. We're talking skulls, bones, DNA, and you expect a mechanical precision from the justice system.
Yeah, you expect it to just work.
Right. A crime is committed, evidence is gathered, a trial happens, and the gavel comes down.
But in the 2006 Nithari serial murders, that illusion of precision was just shattered by a total systemic collapse of procedure. So today's deep dive is going to unpack this absolute nightmare for you. We are drawing from a stack of incredible sources to reconstruct this puzzle. We have a detailed historical timeline of the entire case, mapping out exactly who did what and when.
Which is crucial here.
Yeah, totally crucial. We also have an exhaustive index of the Allahabad High Court's judgment. This basically forensically dissects how the investigation completely unraveled. And we also have this really pregnant ground report interview from Ashtak with the estranged brother of the primary accused.
Which really gives us a look at the massive collateral damage left behind.
Exactly. So our mission here is to take you beyond the sensational headlines that basically dominated the news cycle back in 2006. We're going to trace those horrifying discoveries, deconstruct exactly how a seemingly open and shut case, armed with confessions and cutting-edge DNA evidence, just fell apart in the courts.
And we'll examine the devastating human toll left in the wake of a completely botched quest for justice.
Right. To really understand how this happened, you have to start with the geography of Sector 31 in Noida. Because in this case, honestly, the geography is the story.
It really is.
It dictates who was seen, who was ignored, and how the entire tragedy was allowed to unfold.
You have this stark, almost cinematic contrast baked right into the city planning. On one side, you have D5. This is an affluent, sprawling bungalow owned by a businessman named Maninder Singh Pander.
Right.
And he lives there with his domestic servant, Surinder Kohli. This house and this entire sector really represents wealth, status, and just total insulation from the daily struggles of the working class.
And literally right across from this bubble of extreme wealth is Nithari village. This is home to working class families, migrant laborers, security guards, domestic helpers.
The people making the wealthy sector run.
Exactly. These are the very people who service the affluent homes across the street. They wash the cars, they sweep the floors, they cook the meals.
And starting around 2004 and going into 2005, a terrifying pattern emerges in Nithari. The children and young women of this village start disappearing.
It's just wild to think about.
It wasn't just one or two isolated incidents either. It was a steady, chilling evaporation of human beings from a highly concentrated area.
And our sources detail specific timelines that give you a sense of how mundane these disappearances started. For instance, there is a 20-year-old woman identified in the court documents as A.
Okay.
On October 5th, 2006, she leaves her home at 7 a.m. She works as a domestic helper at another bungalow in the area. She finishes her shift around 1:00 p.m. She starts walking the short distance home, and she is never seen again.
Broad daylight.
Broad daylight.
Yeah.
Just gone. There's another young girl, referred to as XYZ in the documents, who vanishes in early 2005 under similarly mundane circumstances.
What is vital to understand here and what the historical timeline emphasizes over and over is the systemic apathy that greeted these disappearances.
Well, the police response.
Yes. You have parents, frantic with worry, repeatedly going to the local police station. They are begging for help. They know their children didn't just wander off. But the authorities were continually, almost aggressively ignoring them.
The excuses the police gave these families, they are infuriating to read. The sources note that local authorities would claim the missing girls had probably just eloped.
Right, the go-to excuse.
Yeah. Or, incredibly, they told the parents they were lying about the ages of the missing children. They would look at a missing child report and tell the parents, well, no, she was actually an adult who ran away after a family fight.
It is like they applied a see no evil filter exclusively to the poor.
That's exactly what it was.
The police response was characterized by a fundamental disbelief and dismissal of the working-class residents of Nithari. If you are listening to this and wondering how dozens of people can go missing without a massive manhunt, you have to factor in how socioeconomic status dictates access to the justice system.
Right, because if this was the wealthy neighborhood,
It would be national news instantly. The police simply did not view the residents of Nithari as citizens worthy of a full-scale investigation.
but the sources reveal a detail that pushes this way beyond mere apathy. It suggests something much more sinister.
The cricket incident.
Yes, the cricket incident. In March 2005, boys from Nithari were playing cricket in the open space, behind bungalows D5 and D6. The ball goes into the brush, they go looking for it, and they see a human hand sticking out of the mud.
God.
Right? They run back, they tell the elders immediately call the police. And what does the local police force do? They come to the spot, tell the villagers there's nothing to worry about, and they literally shovel mud over the human hand to conceal it.
That specific incident is a glaring indictment of the local authorities. It is one thing to lazily dismiss a missing persons report. It is an entirely different level of complicity to physically bury human remains found behind a wealthy person's house.
Exactly. I have to wonder, was the local police just staggeringly incompetent? Or was this active, paid concealment to protect the affluent residents of Sector 31? Hey, when you are shoveling dirt over a dismembered hand, you aren't just ignoring a crime. You are participating in a cover-up.
It raises a terrifying question about who the police were truly serving.
Yeah.
By December 2006, the residents of Nithari had simply had enough. The disappearances hadn't stopped, the police were doing nothing, so the community took matters into their own hands.
They had no other choice.
None. Two residents in particular, both of whom had missing daughters, began to heavily suspect Surinder Kohli, the domestic help at D5. They sought the help of former Resident Welfare Association President S.C. Mishra to confront the situation.
They essentially had to do the police's job for them. They mobilized and they searched the drain and the enclosed gallery behind houses D5 and D6 themselves.
And that is when they made the undeniable, gruesome discovery that finally broke the dam. They found a decomposed hand in the drain. With a crowd gathering and the evidence literally in plain sight, the police were finally forced to act. They brought in earth movers, they started digging, and the true scale of the nightmare was unearthed. Skulls, bones, massive amounts of human remains, and the decomposing clothing of the missing children were pulled from the muck.
It's just horrific.
Yeah.
So on December 29, 2006, Maninder Singh Pandar and his servant, Surinder Kohli, are officially taken into police custody. And almost immediately, the police parade out a narrative.
Right, the concession.
Yeah, they announce that Kohli has confessed to everything. He allegedly admits to luring these victims, often by promising sweets to the children or offering domestic work to the young women, sexually assaulting them, killing them by strangulation, and then dumping their remains in the drain in the gallery behind the house.
And the public reaction was instantaneous and explosive, as you'd expect. You had angry, grieving mobs clashing with the police outside the D5 residence. The state government, facing immense pressure and national outrage, was forced to suspend and dismiss several local police officers for gross dereliction of duty.
Which, I mean, was the least they could do at that point.
Right. The sheer scale of the possibility of over 19 victims, mostly children, murdered right under the noses of the authorities, shook the entire nation.
And the details that started leaking out to the media were like something out of a horror movie. The initial public narrative, fueled by police statements regarding Kohli's alleged confession, contained horrific allegations. We are talking about claims of necrophilia, of cannibalism, of dismembering bodies with a butcher-like precision using knives and axes.
The media frenzy was absolute. If you look back at the coverage, as the Acharkar Ground Report mentions, you are instantly hit with terms like serial rapist, monster, cannibal.
It was everywhere.
Everywhere. There were widely circulated stories that Kohli would boil the remains of the children in a pressure cooker. The narrative of the demonic servant was cemented in the public consciousness before a single piece of evidence was ever presented in a courtroom.
So with the local police thoroughly discredited and basically run out of town by the public, the investigation was handed over to the Central Bureau of Investigation, the CBI, in January 2007, and the CBI decided they needed to bring the absolute full weight of modern 21st century forensic science to bear on this case to restore public trust.
Right, they had to prove they were competent. They flew Pandar and Kohli to the Directorate of Forensic Sciences in Gandhinagar, Gujarat. They deployed an entire arsenal of scientific tests. We are talking about Narcoanalysis, polygraph tests, and brain electrical oscillation signature profiling.
Okay, let's pause here because these terms get thrown around in crime documentaries all the time. But what do they actually mean mechanically? I mean, explain brain electrical oscillation signature profiling to me.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like science fiction.
It does, yeah. Brain electrical oscillation signature profiling, often called BOSP or simply brain mapping, is not a lie detector in the traditional sense. It doesn't measure stress like a polygraph. It measures brain waves.
Brain waves.
Yeah. The subject wears a cap fitted with electrodes that monitor electrical activity in the brain. The investigators then present the suspect with auditory or visual stimuli related to the crime, basically details that only the killer or investigators would know.
So they might show him, like, a picture of the murder weapon or read a description of the crime scene?
Exactly. And the theory is that if the suspect has actually been to that crime scene or committed that act, their brain will emit a specific involuntary electrical wave known as a P300 wave.
A P300 wave.
Right. It is a wave of recognition. It happens before the conscious mind can even suppress it. The CBI was using this to try and prove that Coley's brain recognized the gruesome details of the Nithari murders, thereby linking his experiential memory to the crimes.
And narcoanalysis. That's what people usually call truth serum, right?
Yes, narcoanalysis involves intravenously administering a drug, typically sodium pentothal. This lowers the subject's inhibitions and puts them into a hypnotic twilight state.
Like a trance.
Sort of. The idea is that in this state, the conscious mind cannot fabricate lies, and the subject will answer questions truthfully based on their underlying memories. So the CBI subjected Coley to all of this to build an unshakable profile of guilt.
And simultaneously, you have the physical evidence being analyzed by top-tier institutions. Teams from the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, AIIMS, and the Central Forensic Science Laboratory were cataloging the remains. But the linchpin was the DNA.
It always is. The sources detail how the remains were sent to the Center for DNA Fingerprinting and Diagnostics, the CDFD, in Hyderabad, and they got conclusive matches.
Wow.
Yeah. DNA profiling looks at specific regions of a person's DNA called alleles, which are inherited from their parents. By taking blood samples from the grieving parents in Nithari and comparing them to the genetic material extracted from the bones found in the drain, the CDFD could say with scientific certainty who those bones belong to.
For example, they took blood samples from Vandana and Jatin Sarkar, the parents of the 20-year-old victim A, and the DNA profile matched the skeletal remains found in the drain perfectly. It proved that victim A was in that drain.
Furthermore, the victim's parents were brought in to identify the clothing recovered from the site. The mother of victim A actually recognized the white salwar, the yellow kurta, and the rubber slippers her daughter was wearing the exact day she vanished.
That is just heartbreaking. So, based on all of this, the horrific confessions, the brain mapping and narcoanalysis, the undeniable DNA matches, the identified clothing special sessions courts handed down convictions, Coley was given over 10 death sentences in various trials.
Pander was also convicted and sentenced to death in multiple cases.
Right. The public took a collective breath. The monsters of Nithari were caught and condemned. The system, though initially flawed, ultimately worked.
That was certainly the prevailing narrative for a very long time. The media presented it as an airtight triumph of forensic investigation and CBI competence.
Okay, so to a layperson, to anyone reading the newspaper or listening to this deep dive right now, this evidence looks like a titanium vault. We have skulls.
Yeah.
We have flawlessly matched DNA proving those bones belong to the missing children. We have murder weapons. We have brain mapping and truth serums.
It looks perfect.
Exactly. How does a judge look at all of this 21st century forensic science and perfectly matched DNA and throw the entire thing out? I mean, how does an investigation armed with this much ammunition completely unravel?
Because the judge isn't just looking at what the evidence is, they are legally obligated to look at how it was acquired. What is fascinating here, and what is crucial to understand about the justice system, is that science is only as good as the legal procedure used to collect it.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. The DNA proved without a shadow of a doubt that the victims died and were disposed of behind D5, but it did not definitively prove in a court of law who killed them.
Because it just proves the bodies are there, not how they got there.
Precisely. To bridge that gap, to prove that Surinder Kohli was the man holding the knife, the prosecution relied almost entirely on Kohli's confessions and the evidence he supposedly led the police to discover. And when the Allahabad High Court began to forensically dissect how those confessions were obtained, they found the foundation of the case was completely, utterly Rotten.
Which takes us right into the High Court Judgment Index. This index is amazing because it doesn't just say not guilty. It lays out exactly how the defense systematically dismantled the CBI's case piece by piece. Let's start with what the defense called the 60-day black hole.
If you look closely at the timeline, Surinder Kohli was officially arrested on December 29, 2006. But his official confession to a magistrate, recorded under Section 164 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, which is the only type of confession that actually holds weight in an Indian court, was not recorded until March 1st, 2007.
Wait, hold on. March 1st. That is 2 full months later. I thought the law required a suspect to be brought before a magistrate within 24 hours of arrest. I mean, how is 60 days in continuous police custody even legally permissible?
It generally isn't, and that is precisely the point. While a suspect can be remanded to police custody for short periods for investigation, standard procedure dictates they should be moved to judicial custody, meaning a proper prison, away from the investigating officers as soon as possible to prevent coercion.
Right, to keep them safe from the cops investigating them.
Exactly. During that entire 60-day period, Kohli was essentially at the complete mercy of the investigating agencies. Legally, the courts view prolonged, unexplained police custody prior to a confession not as a sign of thorough investigating, but as an environment mathematically engineered for coercion and torture.
So the defense basically argued that these 2 months were not used to gather facts. They argued this time was used to physically torture Kohli, give his massive wounds time to heal so he wouldn't look visibly battered in front of a judge, and extensively tutor him on exactly what to say to make the prosecution's predetermined narrative work.
And Kohli himself made horrifying, specific allegations of torture during this black hole period. He claimed his nails were extracted with pliers. He claimed his genitals were burnt. He claimed that officers poured petrol into his anus to inflict agonizing pain without leaving easily visible exterior scars.
The Judgment Index points out something really revealing about the confession itself. Kohli used the word ratwaya to describe his statement. Ratwaya translates from Hindi as being forced to rote memorize something.
Like a script.
Exactly like a script. And the index notes that on 18 separate occasions during his video-recorded confession, Kohli actually forgot his lines. He stumbled, staring blankly, trying to remember the specific dates, times, and names of the victims he was supposedly confessing to murdering.
He stated quite clearly that the police forced him to memorize the names of the victims and the specifics of the crimes from a script they had written. He also alleged that the CBI utilized severe psychological torture by threatening his family.
Right.
He claimed the officers told him that his family was currently in their custody, and if he did not confess exactly as they demanded on camera, they would leave his family to the mercy of the frenzied mob that was baying for his blood outside the gates.
It's like trying to use the contaminated crime scene swap. It absolutely does not matter if you have a billion-dollar state-of-the-art DNA sequencer, If the detective wasn't wearing gloves when he picked up the weapon, the results are legally worthless.
That's a great analogy.
The court is saying the investigation itself wasn't wearing gloves. The entire process of extracting information was deeply contaminated by these allegations.
Exactly. And the procedural farce did not stop with the torture allegations. It extended into the very room where the confession was formally recorded. Under Section 164 of the CRPC, there are strict, non-negotiable legal safeguards designed to ensure a confession is truly voluntary before a magistrate accepts it.
Because the magistrate is supposed to be impartial?
Yes. The magistrate's primary job is to protect the accused from police pressure.
And the index shows the CBI basically bulldozed right through those safeguards. When Kohli was finally brought to the magistrate in New Delhi on March 1st, after 60 days in the black hole, he was given exactly 5 minutes of legal aid. Think about that. 5 minutes to consult with a lawyer for a man facing over a dozen death sentences.
Furthermore, the procedural violations were brazen. The CBI officers who Kohli alleged had spent the last 2 months torturing him were waiting right outside the door of the video conferencing room while he confessed.
Are you kidding me?
No. And this process took several days to record. At the end of each day of recording, instead of being sent back to the safety of judicial custody in a prison, Kohli was handed right back to the very same investigating officers waiting outside.
Talk about absolute intimidation. Put yourself in that chair. You're sitting in a room telling a judge you committed these horrific crimes, knowing full well that the guys who allegedly poured petrol on you and threatened to let a mob murder your family are standing 3 feet away waiting to put you back in their car.
Right.
How could any judge view that as a voluntary statement?
Precisely. The core duty of the magistrate under Section 164 is to ensure the accused is free from fear and pressure. Handing him back to the police every evening negates that entirely.
Totally negates it.
Additionally, the chief metropolitan magistrate had specifically ordered that Coley undergo a comprehensive medical examination before being transferred to Tihar jail, specifically to document his physical condition.
Because he was claiming torture.
Right. That court order was completely ignored by the investigating officers. There was no medical examination allowed that could document whether he had the old healing injuries from the torture he claimed.
So the confession is entirely compromised.
Yeah.
It is toxic waste legally. But what about the physical evidence? I mean, they found the skulls, they found the murder weapons, and the prosecution's narrative was that they found these things because Coley specifically pointed them out. Doesn't that physical discovery prove he did it, regardless of the confession?
This brings us to a highly technical but crucial part of Indian law, Section 27 of the Indian Evidence Act. This section deals with the discovery of evidence. Legally, confessions made to police are generally inadmissible because of the risk of coercion.
Makes sense.
However, Section 27 offers a narrow exception. If a suspect in police custody provides information that directly leads to the discovery of a new, previously unknown fact or piece of physical evidence, like saying, I buried the knife under the water tank and the police go there and find a knife, that specific piece of information and the resulting discovery becomes admissible and is considered very strong evidence.
Okay, so if Coley said the skulls are in the drain and they went and found the skulls, doesn't Section 27 apply? Case closed.
Not quite, and this is where the prosecution's case spectacularly imploded. The High Court heavily scrutinized the timeline of these discoveries. For Section 27 to apply, the discovery must be a direct consequence of the information given by the accused. The court noted that in the Nithari case, the digging in the drain and the enclosed gallery was already underway by the residents, S.C. Mishra, and the local police long before Coley made his official disclosure statement to the CBI.
Ah, I see. So the police could not legally claim Coley led them to the bodies because the entire neighborhood and the media already knew the bodies were there. You can't discover a fact that is already on the evening news.
Exactly. The evidence wasn't discovered because of Coley, it was already being unearthed. Furthermore, the defense highlighted that the police seemingly fabricated the panchnamas, which are the official recovery memos signed by witnesses documenting how evidence is found.
They fabricated them.
They had shifting, completely contradictory timelines. In one document, they claimed Coley alone led them to the skulls. In a remand application filed the very next day, they claimed Pander and Coley jointly led them to the exact same discovery.
That's just sloppy.
The High Court found the documentation surrounding these recoveries to be incredibly suspicious, forged, and unreliable, which completely severed the legal link between Coley and the scientific evidence.
So if you are wondering how this happens, this is the anatomy of a botched probe. The DNA is real. The dead children are absolutely real. But because the investigating agencies allegedly tortured a confession out of a suspect, ignored foundational legal protocols meant to protect against false confessions, and visibly forged the recovery documents to make their timeline look cleaner, the court had no choice but to throw the evidence out.
Right.
You cannot build a legal conviction on a foundation of police perjury.
The Allahabad High Court ruled that the prosecution totally fundamentally failed to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt because the entire investigative process was fatally tainted by coercion, illegal detention, and severe procedural violations. But the judgment went even further.
How so?
It wasn't just about what the police did wrong to Coley, it was about what they completely, perhaps willfully, ignored.
And this brings us to the elephant in the room, the alternative theory that the High Court explicitly called out the prosecution for ignoring. The highly organized organ trade nexus.
From the very beginning of the gruesome discoveries in the drain, there were persistent rumors and deep suspicions among the Nithari residents about an organ trafficking ring. And there was a very specific, undeniable geographic reason for this suspicion.
Right. We talked about House D5, where the wealthy businessman Pander and his servant Coley lived. Right next door, sharing a wall, is House D6. And according to the historical timeline in our sources, D6 belonged to a doctor named Navin Chaudhary.
A very crucial detail.
Yes. And Dr. Chaudhary was not just any doctor. He had previously been investigated by the police for his alleged involvement in a massive, illegal kidney transplant racket.
And the physical state of the remains found in the drain strongly supported this grim medical hypothesis. When the teams from Ames conducted the post-mortem reports, they noted that the bodies had been chopped up, but they specifically highlighted a butcher-like precision in the dismemberment.
Butcher-like precision.
Yes. The cuts were clean, deliberate, and showed an understanding of joint anatomy. Furthermore, and most chillingly, while the police found numerous skulls, arms, and legs, the torsos, the central cavities where the valuable organs like kidneys and livers are located, were largely missing.
Let's talk about the logistics of harvesting an organ for a moment.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can't just hack out a kidney with a kitchen knife and throw it in a grocery bag. Extracting an organ for a transplant requires a sterile environment.
Absolutely.
It requires specific surgical tools, an understanding of how to clamp major blood vessels to prevent organ death, and crucially, it requires immediate access to specialized medical cooling and rapid transport logistics to get that organ to a wealthy recipient before it becomes unviable.
It requires an immense amount of infrastructure, training, and coordination.
Now contrast those massive logistical requirements with the profile of the accused. You have Surinder Kohli, a domestic servant who migrated from a deeply impoverished village in the hills of Uttarakhand and dropped out of school in the 7th grade. Are we seriously supposed to believe that a 7th grade dropout suddenly developed the anatomical mastery of a transplant surgeon?
It's a massive stretch.
Right. That he could dissect 19 bodies with butcher-like precision, extract the torsos, maintain the viability of organs, and dispose of the evidence, all while operating inside his boss's house without his boss ever noticing.
The contrast is completely jarring, and it is where the prosecution's narrative strains credulity to the breaking point. The prosecution's entire theory relied on framing Kohli as a hyper-competent, psychopathic mastermind capable of defying reality. But the defense argued, and the High Court seemed to heavily acknowledge the possibility, that Kohli was simply the perfect, disposable scapegoat.
I mean, if you were an investigator looking to close a case quickly and quiet a riot, it is so much easier to pin it all on the poor, uneducated servant than to unravel a wealthy, highly organized, immensely profitable medical trafficking syndicate that likely involves powerful people.
I will read you the spirit of the Allahabad High Court's 2023 ruling on this exact point, because it is damning. The court stated that the investigation was conducted in a casual and perfunctory manner, and that the investigating agencies opted for the easy course of implicating a poor servant of the house by demonizing him, without taking due care of probing more serious aspects of possible involvement of organized activity of organ trading.
That is a profoundly scathing indictment of the CBI and the police. The highest court in the state is not just saying they failed to prove Kohli did it, they are explicitly saying the authorities actively chose not to investigate the much more complex and perhaps much more powerful criminals who possess the actual capability to orchestrate this massacre.
By prioritizing a quick, sensational narrative over a rigorous, fact-based, and difficult investigation, the authorities fundamentally compromised the pursuit of truth. And the inevitable legal result of that compromise was the acquittal of both Kohli and Pander by the High Court, a decision that was later upheld by the Supreme Court of India. Legally speaking, they are innocent men.
Which leaves us staring into a massive crater of unresolved grief. Because when the justice system fails this spectacularly, there is no justice, there are only victims. And the human toll of this failure is just immeasurable.
First and foremost, you have to look at the families of the dead children. These are hardworking, impoverished parents who fought an agonizing battle for 17 years. They endured the initial apathy of the police. They endured the horrific discovery of their children's remains in a sewer.
Just unimaginable pain.
They endured a massive, chaotic media circus that turned their grief into daily entertainment. They traveled to endless, exhausting court hearings year after year, and at the end of it all, they were told that the state could not prove who murdered their children.
The sources mention Papu Lal and Durga Prasad, fathers of 2 of the murdered girls. In the early days of the investigation, the government tried to give them compensation checks. It was essentially blood money, an attempt to quiet the outrage. 7 families, including Papu Lal and Durga Prasad, returned the checks in protest. They made it clear they wanted justice, they wanted the truth, not a government payout.
And after the 2023 acquittals, the despair was absolute and total. Durga Prasad was quoted as saying, "This court might have acquitted those monsters, but there is a bigger court of God who will not spare them."
Wow.
Think about the profound loss of faith encapsulated in that statement. When the legal system fails so completely, people are forced to resign themselves to divine retribution because earthly justice has completely abandoned them.
But the blast radius of this botched investigation extends even further than the immediate families of the victims. When authorities manipulate a case to create a scapegoat, it actively destroys innocent lives on the other side of the equation. And this is where that incredible Ajtak ground report comes in. It profiles the severe, multi-generational collateral damage inflicted on Surinder Kohli's family.
It is a profound and disturbing look at how social stigma operates as a lethal force. When Kohli was arrested and the media instantaneously branded him a cannibalistic monster, his family was immediately convicted in the court of public opinion without a single shred of evidence against them.
The reporter tracks down Kohli's estranged brother, who is currently living in deep hiding, absolutely terrified to reveal his new identity or his location on camera. The brother describes the immediate aftermath of the arrest in the winter of 2006. The family was living in Delhi at the time. Their landlord, without warning or legal process, simply threw all their belongings, their clothes, the children's toys, their winter blankets, out onto the freezing street in the middle of the night.
The brother describes crowds gathering, screaming at them, calling them a family of child eaters, and threatening to kill them right there on the street. They were instantly and totally ostracized from society. The brother lost his job immediately. Relatives stopped answering their phone calls, terrified of being associated with the name Kohli.
And the psychological scars detailed in this report are just unbelievable. The brother tells the reporter that for years after the arrest, the family completely stopped eating meat. They didn't even use garlic or onions in their daily cooking.
Think about the level of psychological terror required to fundamentally alter your basic culinary habits within your own home.
Right.
The brother explained that they were terrified that the simple smell of meat or cooking onions wafting out of their window would make the neighbors think they were cooking human flesh, and that a mob would form and come to lynch them. They lived in a state of constant, suffocating fear.
It is absolute paranoia born of systemic trauma. The brother says, "I became just the brother of the Nithari Kohli." He talks about trying to walk down the street to buy groceries and having people swerve to try to hit him with their cars, or neighbors throwing stones from balconies and hurling unimaginable abuses at him and his children.
The reporter asks a very logical question. Why didn't they go to the police for protection from this harassment?
Yeah, that's what you'd think to do.
And the brother's response is heartbreakingly rational. He says, "What could we ask for? Everyone considered us the family of a murderer of 19 women and children. Surviving was a big deal.
Wow.
They could not trust the very institution that was supposed to protect citizens because that institution was the very one that had framed their brother, at least in their eyes, and eventually in the eyes of the High Court. To go to the police was to invite further destruction."
The Ajtak piece uses this incredibly evocative metaphor to describe the family unit. It says the family fractured and scattered like a broken pearl necklace. Kohli's wife eventually had to remarry and entirely change her identity just to protect her children from the crushing stigma. His mother stayed behind in their ancestral village in the hills of Elmora.
And that ancestral home is a potent physical symbol of what this case did to the innocent people adjacent to it. The reporter visits the site and describes it as an abandoned, overgrown ruin. The roof is completely caving in, the windows are shattered. The local villagers won't even walk past it. They consider the land cursed and haunted by the sins of the son.
The mother died a few years ago in that ruin, completely alone, crying for her son. The brothers scattered across the country and changed their names. It is the total eradication of a family lineage wiped out by association.
If you reflect on this, it begs a serious examination of what we demand from our justice system and what the media feeds us. When the public demands a monster to explain an unfathomable tragedy, and the police are pressured to deliver one quickly to save their own careers, the truth becomes a secondary concern.
Yeah, the truth takes a backseat.
Prioritizing closing a case over closing it correctly does not heal the community. It doesn't bring the children back. It just creates a secondary blast radius that ruins an entirely new set of innocent lives.
Okay, let's bring this all together. The Nithari case remains this massive, gaping wound in the Indian judicial system. On one hand, we have the undeniable, horrific reality of 19 murdered women and children. The bones pulled from the drain are real. The agonizing grief of the parents is real.
But legally, functionally, after nearly 2 decades of trials, appeals, and media circuses, we are exactly where we were on the day those boys found the hand in the mud. Back to square one.
Square one.
The Allahabad High Court did not say the murders didn't happen. They said the state completely, utterly failed to prove who committed them. They proved that the police chose the path of sensationalism, illegal detention, fabricated documents, and coerced confessions over competent, rigorous, difficult police work.
Which brings us back to where we started. The expectation of the justice system acting like an X-ray machine, cleanly showing us the break of the bone so it can be set and healed. In Nithari, the machine wasn't just broken, it was actively manipulated by the operators to show a false image, while the real disease was allowed to spread unseen in the dark.
The relentless pursuit of an easy, uneducated scapegoat allowed the true complexity of the crime, the high likelihood of an organized, medically proficient syndicate, to remain buried in the mud, much like that first horrific discovery made by the children playing cricket.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a chilling thought to mull over.
Hmm.
If the confessions were, as the highest court found, coerced fabrications extracted through torture, if the recovery documents were forged to fit a timeline, and if both Surinder Kohli and Maninder Singh Pandher are legally innocent of these murders,
It implies a reality far more terrifying than a lone, uneducated psychopath acting out a horror movie script in a servant's quarter.
it means the real architects of the Nithari massacre, the people who possessed the medical, butcher-like precision to harvest torsos and dispose of 19 children. Those people didn't just get away with it. It means they were actively, perhaps knowingly, protected by the very investigation that was meant to catch them. So who is the real ghost of Sector 31, and how many of them are still walking free?